Hey guys, my name is Chris David, and I'm a part of the CIT336 class. Today, I have a presentation for you for PHP Scope or Variable Scope. Let's jump in. What we'll cover today is what is scope, and I'll show you a couple examples of the different scopes available for us to use in PHP. And then we'll wrap up by discussing some errors and discussing why or when these errors come up. So what is scope? We have three different states of variable scopes, and we'll go through each one of these in detail, but the first is local, global, and static. So simply put, a variable scope is the location where the variable is defined and can be used. So first off, we have local scope. Any variable that is defined and used within a function has local scope, and it cannot be used outside of that function. So here we see dbName is a variable that we defined and use within this function. Now, because it is declared within this function, we can't use it in another function at this time. Our second example is global scope. Now, any variable that is defined outside of a function and then used in a function has global scope. That global scope variable, it must be declared within a function by using the global keyword. So in the example, we see that outside of the function, we have dbName. It's defined, and then within the function, we use that keyword global. This pulls the dbName value into this function, allowing us to use it as the function is executed. So the third one we have today is static scope. This one's a little bit different. This function that we have here in front of us, one is without static scope and one is with static scope. Once a function executes, the variables within these functions, they kind of go away. They're only used once. A static scope variable, when it goes through the function, it doesn't lose the value that it stores. So static scope, a key thing to remember is it can only be used in a local function. So here we have our examples, and we have our variable a here, a equals 0. After this is done, it's gone. But in our function with a static scope being applied, we see the a variable is labeled static, and so after this function, we can call this function several times, and this value will still retain itself and not lose itself after the first time. And I'll show you more on this specific thing when we get into the errors. So if you have questions on that, just hold on another minute. So our errors that we'll cover today actually have to do with global and local to start off. So our dbName is defined outside of the function in the global position. So what makes this an error is we don't use global. We don't use that keyword that we discussed. And so when we actually use dbName down here and in defining the DSN variable, we're going to get an error. To resolve that, we need to use global dbName to pull the value into this function so we can use it throughout the function. Now, another error that we can see here is that once the function is executed here, dbName variable won't be able to be used outside of the function. In this example, we are actually trying to pull a dbName value again. Echo dbName. It's going to give us an error again because we don't have a value tied to that variable. To address this, we need to use global scope, declare the global scope variable within the function here, and then we'll be able to actually execute an echo outside because the value is at global scope position. Now our third one here, as promised, was the static scope variable. This is important to remember that when you use static scope variables, they can only be used within that local function. You can't use that x to be in the second test function or anything like that. But we do have an example here from W3 Schools, and how this applies is we can go ahead and call that function right here and then call it 2 other times. And when this PHP script gets executed, it's going to go from top to bottom all the way through. But every time it calls my test, it's going to give us a stored value and then add x plus plus. So here we have a result of this as 0, 1, 2. This would not work in just a local scope. If we did just local scope without the static, after the first one, we would get 0. And we just wouldn't be able to get anything. Or we'd actually get an error. It wouldn't be saved like in the static scope variable example. So I hope that helps. I used W3 Schools today and PHP.net and as my references, and I hope you enjoy this. Take care for now.